How many of you have even heard of this game? 'Cause I sure hadn't until it was added to the list and then subsequently funded. This is a weird one. It's a mostly competent side-scroller platformer with one actually really cool gimmick and a truly atrocious story. This is one for those of you who've been following me for a while. She's such a bad cook. Isn't that funny? In this case, it's actually her being stupid instead of her being a bad cook. But oh my god. There's... The game also does this thing. I hate to even point this out, because there's so little to talk about narratively here. But it does this thing. It's so rare for me to see a work of fiction do this, where it feels like several pages were just ripped out of the story. So, you know, you're going through the sequence of events, and the player's like, or the characters are like, oh my gosh, we must find out the mystery. We have to understand what's going on with our city and why it's destroyed. And then they go counter someone, and someone says, you don't understand. I don't know. I'm trying to make up something off the top of my head here. The watermelon farm is being shut down. And the characters, rather than saying, what watermelon farm? Or, what does that have to do with anything? Immediately say, oh my god, but if the watermelon farm gets shut down, we'll never be able to actually finish with the slushy competition, which hasn't even mentioned up until this point. I'm like, you're right. And the slushy competition is all that matters. And the character says, I will die for the slushy competition. Draw weapon. Dramatic pose. And you see what I mean when I say it just feels like they ripped pages out of the story, right? They literally just skipped over several story beats and just sort of assumed the player's going to keep up with it. So you're probably thinking, okay, well, this is a platformer. You don't play a platformer for the story. First of all, I play platformers for the story all the time. Thank you very much. But second of all, no. Gameplay. Gameplay is kind of a mixed bag. I'm not going to lie to you. There's two, I would say three, actually, really big flaws in this game. I want to kind of break them down. First of all, the lack of mid-mission checkpointing, which really sucks in several respects of this game. There are several stages and several bosses where they really needed some kind of mid-mission checkpoint to smooth over the experience. Otherwise, you're expected to learn and then do many mechanics for a long period of time without flaw. Oh, no, sorry, you're dead. Screw you. And the hurt box problem. How many of you have played Donkey Kong Country 1, 2, and 3 on the SNES? Great games, right? Yeah. Remember the hit boxes and hurt boxes in that game and how extraordinarily inaccurate they were? Like, notoriously? That's this game. There are several cases where I actually got hit by something, and even in a slowdown replay, I couldn't quite tell exactly how or where. But it's inconsistent. It doesn't always do that. If I were to guess, this is presumption, I would say that the player model, the actual hitbox, is being meshed around based on which animation I'm doing at any given point in time, which means that at certain animations or certain types of attacks, you know, my ankle gets grazed, essentially, or in some cases, the air near me gets grazed, and that counts as killing me. You're probably thinking, hold on. You're getting killed from an ankle attack? Well, yeah, because that leads to the central mechanic of this game, which is the 1 HP thing. You have 1 HP. Anything that hits you kills you instantly. Cool. Actually, legitimately, it's pretty cool. It's probably one of the most interesting aspects of the game design. Now, I kind of just lied to you. There is kind of a health bar in this game. It's your time. So, anytime you get hit, you die instantly, and the game will automatically rewind for a little bit and then freeze for you. And then you have about 3 seconds, depending on some variables, of time to rewind. And it will rewind your inputs and the enemy attacks up to that point in time. Make sense? The game is very smooth about this. You can play, rewind, rapid fire. Now, there's actually a huge amount of nuance and subtlety that goes into this design, which I don't have time to break down all the way. Like, for example, if you try to just tap rewind to go down a little bit, while you're in combat or actively taking hit, it'll actually use up a whole second of time in exchange for the fact that you undid that one hit. Little things like that. You also regain time by standing in certain zones, standing still, But also, if the game itself is moving you, like against your will, that counts as you moving, so you don't regain time. So you have to actually strategize about where you're standing in order to regain your time quickly enough to then use it again. It also refills fairly quickly, but only if you're standing still. Otherwise, it refills very slowly, but it does still refill at all. So you can be in the middle of a fight and still be fighting a boss and still count on a little bit of extra health to work with it in case you make another screw up. This is all actually extraordinarily well designed and easily the hallmark of the entire game. And there's some also difficulty options which change how the regen works, when the regen works, how fast it goes through, stuff like that, right? This is all awesome. And it all, again, is all very, very, very fluid, very smooth. So in most cases, you can tell immediately what you need to rewind, how far you need to rewind, and you can be very, very precise about your movements. And the whole game encourages this kind of frenetic playstyle. Our playstyle, we did both full playthroughs of the game, and it was only 6.4 hours. And that's a pretty solid chunk of holy crapitude. But I mentioned that because the game has that kind of frenetic pace you would expect for a game in which you have 1 HP. It's not quite a punishing platformer, though. Punishing platformers is something more like Celeste or like Super Meat Boy, where the whole point is to fling your corpse at the enemy over and over and over until you refine and learn the individual level, usually an individual screen, enough to progress. This doesn't do that. Punishing platformers is usually more on the puzzle side of things. How exactly do I navigate this room, and then executing that, right? Mastering the room. But it's also not a precision platformer like Mega Man is. Precision platformers, you have tremendous control over your jump, your movement, and you can exactly tell where and how you operate at any given point in time. But it's also not a committal platformer like Castlevania, where once you jump, you're committed to the jump and you have to just kind of plan for that in advance. So what is this? I have no idea. It is all three, but it fails at all three. And this is actually the biggest flaw of the game, and that's what I was building up to here. For all the fun I had, I never really got used to the jumping, the actual platforming itself. So, when you jump, and you have an air jump too. You also have an air dash. But when you jump off of a wall, it's a commit jump. If you jump off a wall, you jump a specific that you cannot control diagonal angle off the wall. Now you can start to push against that after a certain part in the parabola. But until you hit that arc, you're committed to this. And the wall jump is mandatory because a huge amount of the game and bosses are all vertical. So you have to be planning for that committal jump. But you have total precision control of your initial jumping. And especially if you're doing the air dashing, which I already mentioned. And then there's the fact that you die instantly if you screw up, but there's enemies absolutely everywhere, which is another aspect usually not seen in a punishing platformer. I described this in much more depth on the stream, and as usual, if you want more in-depth thoughts, that's what the VOD is for. But the fact that the jumping is so inconsistent with itself drags the entire game down. If it was double committal, we could adjust to it eventually. We could have the mentality of, this is my arc and I have to live with it. If it was fully precision, like Mega Man, then we would be able to just have control of our jumping, and we would be able to do that throughout the course of the game. This inconsistent back and forth thing, depending on the specific rules of what we're interacting with in what order, screws with it. It's also, if I might be so bold personally, the reverse of what it should be. Your initial jump is precise, but your wall jump is committal, even though in almost every case you want your wall jump to be precise, to be able to do something like this, or like this. Instead, you're stuck doing this, which just throws you. Because in your mind, it's like, that's reversed. I'm confused. Having said that, if you've never played this game, I can recommend it. The gimmick is cool, the extra levels are neat, and it's pretty fun. Maybe skip the story, though. Not the greatest.